Hello, it's the GameDay Podcast. Time to review the weekend's Premier League action in the company of talkSPORT's football correspondent Alex Crook. He's here. Hello.
Hello.
And talkSPORT's best friend, the assistant editor of The Mirror, the very lively Darren Lewis. Hello.
Hello.
Oh, you sound a bit interesting. You're still in Manchester after the Manchester derby. You sound a little bit Dalek-y, but we'll get through it because we want to have you here. What a weekend. North London trash, Arsenal thrashing Tottenham Hotspur. Slick City, Connor comes to Chelsea's rescue. And Wolves say, go large. From talkSPORT, this is the GameDay Podcast. Hello guys, hope all is well. Top stories from the weekend. Haaland becomes the first player in Premier League history to score 3 consecutive Premier League home hat-tricks. Foden gets his first treble. Arsenal remain top of the pile. Liverpool concede first in a Premier League game. Again, it's the 9th time in 11 matches. Wolves sack their manager. And the Real Madrid president says the Super League will save football. Which of those is the biggest story of the week, Crook?
Cool. Well, in terms of ramifications for the future of the game, probably the last one. But obviously, Haaland setting another record. He has filled plenty of column inches, and you do wonder how many more hat-tricks he might get between now and the end of the season. Could he get 10 hat-tricks in the Premier League this season? We talked about how many goals he might score. Could he actually get 10 trebles? I wouldn't rule it out.
Yeah, quite possibly. I mean, he's been incredibly consistent. I think I mentioned to you over the course of the first few weeks of the season that his XG was at a rate where he could end up scoring 55 goals this season. And then I'd said, he's not going to get 55 goals. So we're going to do a 55-goal tracker, right? Okay, so each week we're going to see how close he is to getting 55 goals. He's now got 17 goals in all competitions, 14 in the league. 14 in the league. That's amazing, right? Because how many games have they played? 8 games, right? 14, 8 games. Okay, so here we go. I'm getting my as we're doing this, I'm getting my calculator. You can see me, right? If you're watching on YouTube, you can see me. I'm getting my calculator out. Here we go. This is the Haaland 55 calculator.
I'm disappointed you've not got one of them massive desk calculators. I struck you as someone who would definitely own one of those.
So there's 30 games left, yeah? Okay, so we're on for, at the moment, another 52.5 goals. So, hold on.
65 goals.
Just to clarify, at the moment, we're on for 66.5 goals. Okay, so we're doing quite well on the 55-goal tracker. It is just going to be a hell of a lot of goals, isn't it? I mean, wow, this guy is going to be amazing. What was your big story from the weekend, Darren?
Mine would definitely have to be Haaland. I think that we are seeing one of the great players in world football right now. I wouldn't say at his peak. He's nowhere near his peak. He's 22 years of age. And I think we're at the stage now, we get it every so often in football, in sport, where a phenomenon arrives. I've said this before, about Haaland. When you like your horse racing, Crook, Frankel, when he arrived and nobody could beat him, and he reeled off win after win after win. For older people like me, Mike Tyson when he first arrived, and he was ripping people apart. Roger Federer when he was unbeatable. Steve Davis in snooker when he was invincible. This guy is invincible. I can't give you enough superlatives about the brilliance of Erling Haaland. I was thinking last night, would it be too much to compare him to R9, the OG Ronaldo? Because when he gets the ball and he is homed in on goal, he is unstoppable. You ally that to his movement, his poise, his composure. It doesn't matter what's going on around him. If he is if he is within range, he can score. Honestly, I was at the game yesterday. That's why my sound is so bad, and I'm doing it from the hotel, and we're joking all about that. But the real serious aspect of this is it's getting to the stage where people want to say, I saw him play. That's how good he is. And when he scored that second goal, where De Bruyne crossed from the right-hand side, and you thought the ball was going into touch, you thought he couldn't possibly reach it, and he was like, go, gadget legs, and he extended, and he managed to get it in at the back post. And there wasn't necessarily a cheer from these City fans. It was a gasp in the Etihad Stadium of disbelief, because for all the hype that surrounded Haaland, he really is that good.
Yes, he is, and I must admit that one of the pleasures of my season so far was commentating on his first Champions League appearance for Manchester City, where the Sevilla fans ended up giving him a standing ovation at the end of the match because he was that good. And, you know, look, he's a little... Someone's got to find a way of trying to stop him. I don't know who can do that. I don't know if anyone can do that, but
Bournemouth
I'm sure
did it.
We'll find out in the fullness of time. Well done, Bournemouth. Fantastic. Brilliant.
But Sam, you know what? What you just said, that sums up what I was saying a second ago, because I remember when Messi would get applause from opposition fans when he was at Barcelona. Zidane would get it when he was playing for Real Madrid from opposition fans. Sometimes, once in a lifetime, a player comes along that's so good you just have to applaud him and you just have to recognise how good he is. And Haaland is that good. I think he will rack up ridiculous numbers because it doesn't matter how you play against him. With City, people say, how do you stop Haaland? But if you deploy men to stop him, a Foden will score, a De Bruyne will score, a Silva will score. And then a game opens up and you then have to try and stop them, and then he'll find a space to kill you. So he will rack those numbers up, and we will be back here again talking about what he can achieve in a game.
So he's basically like the Terminator. He whatever happens at some stage, he will be back. We're all in trouble, aren't we? Because Manchester City are just on this wonderful sort of trajectory of producing perfect football. It was quite interesting, actually, after the game, listening to Pep Guardiola suggest that there were a few players that weren't very good during that match. They won 6-3. They could have won 9-0. I mean, it was a disappointment that they conceded 3 goals. In fact, most people are looking at how Man United scored 3 goals. Anyway, we should probably look at it from a Manchester United perspective as well. It has been a brilliant weekend, and this is how it unfolded on talkSPORT. So let's start with Manchester City 6, Manchester United 3. Yeah, Manchester United scored 3 goals in this game, but it never felt like that. I thought it was a very poor performance right from the very start from Manchester United. And as good as Manchester City were, and we've waxed lyrical about Erling Haaland, Phil Foden was superb. De Bruyne, I mean, he should be illegal, really. He's so incisive with his passing. He creates so many chances. And when you've got players like Foden and Haaland, you're always going to score a lot of goals. But Manchester United, I thought, were really off the pace. They were lacklustre. It was a derby game which they didn't get up for. They didn't get in the faces of Manchester City from the very start, which is what they needed to do. I thought the team selection was wrong. Casemiro should have been in the team. If he's not fit and up to speed, my question is why? Because he's been there for a month now. They've hardly had any games during that period. He should be ready to play. Why on earth, or who believes that you can go into a Manchester derby against one of the greatest teams that have ever been constructed with a midfield of Scott McTominay, Bruno Fernandes and Christian Eriksen, talented players in their own right, but as a 3 in midfield, a blend in midfield, that's never going to be able to thwart Gundogan, De Bruyne and Bernardo Silva, Alex Crook.
No, absolutely, and it looked a game too big for Malacia as well. Actually, his performance reminded me of Patrice Evra in a Manchester derby back in 2006, early in his United reign. He struggled in that fixture as well. Dalot gets booked with inside 2 minutes, sets the tone, really knows that you then can't really go and engage Jack Grealish for the rest of the game. I agree with you on Casemiro. I think Scott McTominay has played really well in the last 4 games for United, but this was clearly a step up in opposition. I think it was a bit arrogant from Erik ten Hag to think that he could use the same tactics against a side of this calibre. The word I used at half-time on Twitter, and it's quite an emotive one, I understand that, was cowardly. I thought it was a performance from United that lacked bravery. They panicked in that first half every time they were in possession. Their forward players didn't really want to get on the ball and try and hurt what was a makeshift Manchester City defence. They did that a bit more in the second half, and as you say, they've ended up scoring 3 goals, but the damage was done in the first 45, and I think the manager came out afterwards and really backed me with my assessment and the word cowardly, because he said the players lacked belief, and I think they did lack the minerals for a Manchester derby against this City side, and that's a worry going forward. If you're Gareth Southgate watching that game and you look at the performance of Marcus Rashford and Jadon Sancho, 2 of the biggest culprits for going missing in action, I think you're thinking, do I really want to take these guys to the World Cup? Are they going to turn up and be noticed.
He's not really thinking that, is he? He hasn't been thinking that for a year, has he? I mean, that's the whole point. I mean, there's been a lot of debate, and I remember reading a big piece last week about how Marcus Rashford, back in form, should be part of the England setup. No doubt one of the first names on the squad team sheet for the World Cup. I haven't seen any evidence to suggest that that should be the case. A couple of performances against light opposition at the beginning of the season, not really. I wouldn't say that he's anywhere near the consistency of Tammy Abraham or Ivan Toney or obviously Harry Kane. I read a brilliant report in the Times this morning in which there is a suggestion that sometimes when you're up against the best playmaker in the world, passing to the best goal scorer in the world, in a team which is minutely calibrated to put them both in the perfect positions to do so, you face a level of quality which is simply unanswerable, Darren. Is that one half of the story, and the other half that Manchester United just weren't really ready for the battle?
I think they weren't ready for the battle. I think there was decision-making in the final third from United that was strange, to say the least. There were moments in the first and second half where they could have played players into space and chose the wrong option. Anthony didn't turn up until the second half. Wonderful goal, though he may have scored. I think that it should have been more faster. It should have been faster and more frenetic. And had it been, then maybe we would still have had a City win. Maybe we would still have had a high score. But at least you wouldn't have been able to say that the scoreline, even the 3-goal deficit, flattered United. Because it did. I think the Crook's right. I don't like throwing words like cowardly around. I'd rather go with what Ten Hag said in terms of belief. They didn't turn up believing they could win. They didn't turn up believing that they could give City a game. And to be fair, this was a considerable step up in class for them, even from beating Arsenal.
But the truth is, Darren, we didn't believe that they could give Manchester City a game. So no one did. There's not anybody who sort of sat there and thought they could give them a game.
I did.
Not really. We sat on this pod on Thursday and we all said, we can say nice things about Manchester United and their ability to counter-attack, but ultimately it's going to end with Erling Haaland scoring and a pretty good Manchester City win. The only person who actually said that wasn't going to be the case was Crook, but he changed his mind from the first paragraph to the last paragraph. So, they are a team that isn't quite good enough to do the things that they want to do just yet. And they're playing against a team which, as James Gerbrandt says in the Times earlier on Monday morning, is like a 7-year laboratory experiment to try and find perfection in football.
But Sam, there's a big difference between saying, I think City will win, as I did, and I've not really deviated from that, and I think City will win, but United will give a better account of themselves than they have done in the last 2 Manchester derbies, which is what I said. And that's why I'm disappointed. Not because City have won. I'm not surprised by that. I've said all along, I think City will win. I think Haaland will score. You know what I think of Haaland. But I did think that United would turn up to the party, and they didn't.
Crook?
Yeah, I'm with Darren. Obviously, we all expected Manchester City to win, but there is a way to lose a football match. And I've said that before when it comes to United on this podcast. And that first half performance wasn't the way to lose a Manchester derby. They made it too easy for Manchester City, showed them too much respect. And I do wonder, moving forward now, if character-wise, Erik Ten Hag has made a decision on 1 or 2 of those starting players. I expect Casemiro to start the next game. And actually, it's a big game on talkSPORT next Sunday against Everton, because we'll know more about the spirit of these Manchester United players with how they react to this defeat.
Okay, well, that was the Manchester derby. Quite a seismic victory for Manchester City. What about the North London derby? I was there on Saturday lunchtime, and I thought Arsenal were absolutely brilliant. I spoke to Mikel Arteta afterwards, and the question I asked him, Darren, was, what was more impressive? The fact that you've turned up and you've won a big game against a local rival, but also a rival for the top 4, or the manner in which you did it? And he said, without doubt, the manner in which we did it, because they suffered a setback midway through the first half. They were completely the dominant force in the game, suffered a setback, but then managed to deal with that. And at times gone by, Arsenal would wilt under that sort of little bit of pressure, but they recalibrated, went again, and took the game away from what was a very passive Tottenham Hotspur.
Yeah, I'd agree with all of that. I think it was a statement victory. it was a victory that basically said, okay, you took our Champions League place, but we've come back. We're stronger. We've got winners in the side now. We've got depth in the side now. We play a better brand of football. And most importantly, we have the character that we were just discussing that United lack, belief. And I think they are a side that believes in each other. They've healed from the disappointment from last season, and they're really driven. They're using that to motivate them. And you have to say, how much admiration I have for Conte. But I think as far as Arteta is concerned, his Arsenal this season would appear to be further forward than Spurs are under Conte.
Yeah, I think they've done brilliantly the way they've sort of managed to not only start the season in great form, but maintain that and look at if they're in perfect shape during matches. They look dominant. They hold the team that they're playing against, the opponents in opposition territory. They flex their formation to this 4-1-4-1 formation with Thomas Partey screening the back four. He was brilliant at that. Xhaka goes forward. You've got Ødegaard playing as a number 10. You've got Zinchenko wandering into midfield to make up the numbers. You've got Martinelli spreading the play on the left-hand side. Saka a threat on the right. And then you've got Gabriel Jesus, who's been absolutely terrific. And if he doesn't score goals, which he has done, he occupies defenders, causes them real grief. I think he's absolutely brilliant. What did you make of the sending off, Alex? Emerson Royale.
Yeah, I think it was a red card. I know there's been a little bit of debate. I thought it was a dangerous tackle. I thought it was quite a brainless tackle, to be honest. And I think if we're talking about Tottenham in terms of getting closer to Manchester City, as a lot of people were at the start of the season, with the greatest will in the world, they're not going to do that with Emerson Royal as their first choice right back. He's simply not good enough.
No.
And lost his head in a big game situation. I was disappointed by Spurs, and I know that Darren Lewis is chief cheerleader in the Antonio Conte fan club. I actually think if Jose Mourinho had sent out Tottenham to play in such a defensive manner in a North London derby, he would have got hammered for that. I thought it was a really negative game plan for Antonio Conte. One team tried to win the game, one team tried to stay in it, and ultimately football was the winner.
That's what Perry Grove says during commentary on Saturday. You know, one team is trying to survive, the other team is trying to win the match. And the truth is that Antonio Conte has been setting Tottenham up like that all season. There's no way that we should be surprised by the fact they were so passive and pragmatic in that North London derby. That's how he did it against Marseille. That's how he did it against Sporting. That's how he did it against Wolves and against Southampton. Ultimately, that is how his Tottenham Hotspur play. They are quite dull to watch. If you've watched any Tottenham games this season, it's very rare that you've had a thriller-minute bit of action. In fact, the last half hour against Leicester City was probably the best in terms of entertainment value. But if you watch the whole 90 minutes of that match, they won it 6-2, but Leicester, arguably, for large parts of the match, were the better team, remarkably. There's certainly no way that you could suggest that Tottenham were the better team in this game. Harry Kane, though, did score a 7th top division penalty against Arsenal, the joint by one player against a specific team since Frank Hudspeth hit 8 penalties against Sheffield United between 1913 and 1926 for Newcastle United.
Darren was there.
That's pretty impressive. Did he put them to the right or the left of the goalkeeper, Darren? Yeah.
I just very quickly, very quickly. I wouldn't get too carried away with how bad Spurs were. I remember when Conte won the league with Chelsea, started that particular season with a 4-2-4 formation, went to Arsenal, got ripped apart 3-0, and went away, changed the system
at half-time in that game.
No. But at half-time, but obviously after that match, stuck with 3-4-3. And I remember him absolutely demolishing the league. They didn't lose a game afterwards. They won the league, turning handsprings. And it said to me that he's a guy who knows how... He's a pragmatist. And if it is the case that he used to go away and work on a different system, he'll do that. I don't think this is the end of Spurs. I don't want to sit here and say because of that Spurs won't challenge for the title and Arsenal will. I think Spurs will be back because this is the guy, you look at his track record, he knows how to react to events, and he does, even though some people might not think he does have the personnel.
Well, I understand your comparison to that season, and I think there was a lot of talk about 2016-17 when they were losing the game on Saturday. One of the things I will say, though, is that when he went into Chelsea, he sort of almost acceded a little bit of control to the players and said, yeah, okay, you like playing in a 4-3-2-1, whatever it was at the time. You like playing with a back four. I want to play with a back three, but ultimately, you've been successful doing this, so we'll stick with this, and then we'll move forward if we have a problem. They had a problem. He then changed it at half-time in that game when they were 3-0 down and went, right, now it's my way. They went on a run of 13 games without defeat after, I think, 13 wins in a row, actually, after that, and then won the league, as you say. But that was a team that he was changing. He's been at Tottenham for a year now. That was 6 weeks, 7 weeks into a season. You know, he designed this system. He's put these players into this formation. It's not them doing it, and he's not going to come up with a completely different way of playing. He decided to set them up like that. And I think that is an indictment, actually, as to the way that they've approached this game and approached this season. When I spoke to him afterwards, he said, actually, my game plan worked, and I would have won the game had the final ball in the first half been better. I'm not sure that was the case. I think he's looking through rose-tinted spectacles there, Crook.
I agree. I think Arsenal were the dominant force right from the off. He also suggested, I think in one interview, that the sending off had a bearing on the outcome. I don't think it did. I think Arsenal would have won the game anyway. And, you know, we're 7-8 games into the season now. We're trying to work out what Arsenal are. Are they the most serious contenders for the title apart from Manchester City? Are they certainties for the top four? It certainly looks that way at this moment in time. And you look at the summer transfer windows they had. Both clubs spent a lot of money, but we had a caller on the boot room who summed it up quite well, actually. Tottenham, I think, spent money on strengthening the squad. Arsenal spent money on improving their first 11. And I think the signings of Jesus and Zinchenko that you mentioned, I think will prove to be two of the most important signings of the season. Darren can shake his head all he likes, but apart from Richarlison, how many of the players that Tottenham signed in the summer have made any real impact? And has anyone seen Jed Spence, by the way?
Darren, you were shaking your head there.
Richarlison in himself improves that team. Bissouma, when he's fit, he will improve that team. Longley coming in improves that team because it means that they don't have to start Davinson Sanchez anymore. Sessegnon coming in and Perisic, both of them improve that team. Perisic is a winner, has done under Conte in the Italian league when they lifted the title. So there are players. Listen, I'm not necessarily saying that Arsenal and Jesus and Zinchenko are not terrific acquisitions, because you're right, they are. That's not what I'm saying.
They're transformative signings.
Let's not get transformative. Listen, again, I wouldn't even
in the dressing room,
too
Darren.
much with
In the dressing room, you speak to any of the Arsenal players, right, and they will tell you that the mentality that has been brought to the club by Zinchenko, by Gabriel Jesus, has elevated their expectations, because these two guys are proper winners. They know how to win, and they're experienced at doing so, and they demand that everybody else does that around them as well. So it might be sort of like, you know what Crook's like. He likes to go to the top end of a statement and make the biggest and boldest claim possible. It may not be transformative, but they've had a huge, huge impact on the rest of the players that were in that group, while strengthening the starting 11. I actually think underrated. No one's really talking about it because he's been there sort of on the fringes for a while. But William Saliba coming into the team has made a huge, huge difference to Arsenal, because he is a ball-playing central defender. He's absolutely huge. He reads danger. He is very, very good.
Last word on North London. I just think, I don't disagree with anything either of you have said. I've made that point myself in terms of the leadership that Zinchenko and four-time winning Jesus, title-winning Jesus bring to the side. Anyone with a pair of eyes can see that. I just think there are two things to point out. City will win the league. City will win the league. They've got one of the great strikers in world football, the great strikers in a generation. They will win the league. Full stop. Arsenal will finish in the top four. Spurs, I think, will be among those in contention to finish best of the rest. They've had a bad day at the office, but Conte has had bad days before. He knows how to respond. The circumstances at Chelsea might have been different, but the fact is he still had to come up with a different system, a different formula, and he did that spectacularly.
Yeah, well, he's played Chelsea and got battered and somehow come away with a point. He's played Arsenal, got battered and lost 3-1. I'd be interested to see what happens over the course of the next month or so. They didn't get to play Manchester City, did they? Because the game was cancelled. I think they might have got off a bit lightly there. Right, okay, let's move on to Chelsea, because obviously if all these teams are going to finish in the top four, then Chelsea and Liverpool are obviously fighting to do so as well. We'll get to Liverpool in just a second, but Conor Gallagher came back to Selhurst Park at the weekend to haunt Crystal Palace. There's a lot of talk about the Thiago Silva sending off and people suggesting that he was lucky to stay on the pitch and that might have been a pivotal moment in the game. What utter rubbish. There is absolutely no way that a referee or a VAR is going to send somebody off for the denial of a goal-scoring opportunity 16, 17 yards into his own half with 30, 40 yards to run into. The law itself says that the next action has to be almost a certain goal. There's absolutely no way that next action is going to be a certain goal. It's far too far away. There's a covering defender. There's no referee anywhere that is going to give that as a denial of a goal-scoring opportunity. And the speculation that they might, I think, was absolutely ludicrous.
I agree. I can see Darren is virtually eating his hand as you're speaking, so clearly he's got a counter opinion. But no way was that a denial of a goal-scoring opportunity. So far out wide, there's so much distance to cover between the free kick, the infringement and the goal. You've got a covering defender in Ben Chilwell, and Ayew scores one goal every 15 games. So let's take that into account as well.
Yeah, unless it's in front of the goal and there's literally 1 yard between him and an open goal, it's not a denial of a goal-scoring opportunity.
You cannot judge the law on the frequency with which a player scores.
Forget that. I'm judging it on the distance to the goal.
Well, I know, but the fact is that the distance between... I don't think he's as far out as you're making out.
He is.
I think that... And the fact is, right, that what you've just said there, and it's important to point out, is your interpretation of the law. And very, very often, the law is about interpretation. And most people watching that will see that what Thiago Silva did there, he cheated. He handled the ball so that Ayew couldn't get away. And had Ayew got away, he would almost certainly have had an opportunity to score.
That is how they referee the games. Therefore, they were never, ever going to send him off. You might disagree with it, but that's not how they referee the games. That's a fact.
I think the biggest issue with this is that the team being wronged is Crystal Palace. I think if this were a different team with higher profile players, this debate would be completely different. And I think, please, you can't offer me what the PGMOL say. The PGMOL make it up from week to week. And you might say, oh, well, this was the briefing then, this was the briefing then. The big problem that the PGMOL suffered from season in, season out is inconsistency. So someone will interpret the law in one way, 1 week. Another referee, possibly on the same day, will interpret it in a different way. We've spoken about that many, many times on this very show. I look at that situation there, and I've watched it many times, and the conclusion I reach time and again is that he would have got free and had an opportunity to test the goalkeeper had Thiago Silva not handled the ball twice.
Liverpool 3, Brighton 3. No doubt the big story of Saturday. There's a lot of people that are not quite on their game, but all the goals over the weekend came down his side. And every single one of those 3 goals, there is a moment where you think, Trent, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing?
I wonder if the form of Virgil van Dijk has had a real impact as well. And actually, when Van Dijk was at the peak of his powers, which clearly he's not at the moment, did he cover for a lot of Trent Alexander-Arnold's defensive deficiencies? Because you're right, there are big problems in that Liverpool rearguard. I think they've missed Andrew Robertson on the left-hand side as well. And they look like a team who are vulnerable every time the opposition comes forward. And that hasn't been the case for Jurgen Klopp and his mentality monsters in the past. I think Salah is still floundering as well, nowhere near his best. And I wonder, again, you talk about relationships in football, and from the outside looking in, we all thought that maybe Sadio Mane and Mo Salah weren't the best of friends on or off the pitch. But I think Mane was a really important foil for Salah, and clearly he's missed him this season. And it could get worse before it gets better for Liverpool. They've got a big double-header in the Champions League against Rangers. They should win that, but obviously you've got to take into account the Ibrox atmosphere in the case of the second game. And the next two Premier League games, I think I'm right in saying, are Arsenal away and then Manchester City. You can't really make a case for Liverpool turning up and winning either of those two fixtures at this moment in time, not on form.
What do you think of the problems, Darren?
Well, I'll tell you what the problems are not. The problems are not Mane leaving the football club, because Mane doesn't play in central defence, and Liverpool have been done by lots of defences errors. The problem is not Trent Alexander-Arnold. I'm not going to be part of a conversation about him, another conversation about him. I looked at the Liverpool performance at the weekend, and I could see a number of players who simply hadn't turned up. I look at the lack of a press anywhere on the pitch. I look at simple balls being played past Fabinho without his ability to respond to them. There is a lack of desire, hunger. You could maybe make a case for the front three, but even they, as brilliant as they are in front of goal, are not pressing with any kind of intensity. And something is very, very wrong at Liverpool. I think to focus on Trent is a massive mistake. You know, Trent's out of form. There's no. He is a class player who's out of form. Even the very best players have a little dip in form sometimes. But the issue is not him, and I don't want to get involved in a conversation about him. And the issue isn't Mane. It's a huge misdirection. Something is wrong with Liverpool right now.
Well, tell us what then, Darren. If you don't think Trent's the problem, tell us what is the issue.
Look at the performance. Look at the performance on Saturday. Have a look back. Look at there are so many occasions. Brighton are a wonderful side, but they were allowed to play. It's as if Liverpool have stopped pressing, tackling, denying opposition teams space and time. They're not doing it anymore. Watch the game and you will see it time after time after time. Totally. Sometimes the illusion of their ability going forward masks so much. And this is one of those occasions. Honestly, I'm not saying I don't want to talk about it to be facetious or to be discourteous at all. What I'm saying is all of those debates are a misdirection. If you look at the entire team...
They are.
Listen, one of the things I didn't want to say, because I don't want to get too carried away, but I was actually alarmed. I wouldn't even say, it's a bad... Because I come on here, you two give me stick and whatever else, and we have a little bit of fun. But I was actually alarmed by that game at the weekend. Not by the numbers, not by the fact that Brighton could and probably should have won, but by the Liverpool performance. Because that Liverpool performance said that they are not doing the basics that they used to do. And I don't understand why.
But Darren, you don't want to talk about Trent Alexander-Arnold, but the reason I brought it up was because, and I mentioned right at the top, he is not the only one. I said that 3 times during that introduction because...
But then if he's not the only one, Sam, we shouldn't be focusing on him.
You're missing the point of what I'm saying to you. You're interrupting because you don't want me to talk about him. But the truth is that he should be taken out of the team, taken out of the firing line. He has been given too much attention. There's too much talk about him in the media. There's too much talk about him from rival fans. There's too much talk about him from Liverpool fans. All that attention has culminated in a situation where everything that he does is poured over with minute detail because he's a talented young English player. So he should be taken out of the firing line, looked after and kept away from it for a little while because he isn't the only problem, but he's being made to look the only problem because, yes, look, the first goal, poor header from him, which leads to the ball bouncing to Henderson. Henderson then makes a mistake. Henderson makes a mistake. Then it goes in behind him.
On him, and now you're focusing on him. And that's exactly my point. He should be taken out of the side. Van Dijk is not too good to be taken out.
You're not listening.
It was
You're not listening to what we're saying. I am saying to you that that's what happens because he is now being put in a position where he's going to make a mistake.
But you're not listening to me. You're saying that there is too much attention on him. You
just don't want to talk about him.
And then you're going through it. No, not listen. I don't want to talk about it because if I do that, I am actually perpetuating exactly what you were saying. Yeah. Focusing on him.
So take him out of the team.
Saying, fine, but then if you take him out of the team will not perform any better. That's my point.
Well, it's not going to perform any worse. They just conceded 3 goals at home. They conceded 9 times in the first time in the match for 11 matches.
Again, you're not listening to what I'm saying. I'm saying look at the performance of the entire team.
Agreed.
Tell me where you could see a press, a tackle, any kind of intensity. It is not there. And when you say all of the goals come down Trent's right, and you want to make that point and maybe suggest that I'm unwilling to listen, I'm not unwilling to listen. What I'm unwilling to do is go down a route that you're saying we shouldn't go down, but then you're going down. You've got to make
I'm not going down the route. I'm saying to you that you've put him in a position where people are then going to see what it is that are his problems. His problems become spotlighted because that did happen. So why put him in that situation? Why come out and say the things that Jurgen Klopp has said, where it's he actually said on Thursday he's a great defender. There's nothing wrong with his defensive abilities, or saying about how much of a good defender he was and he's overplayed his defensive deficiencies. And then 2 days later, obviously, he makes mistakes and then again he's in the spotlight. Don't talk about it. Don't engage with it. Don't allow him to become the conversation. It's not fair on him to focus on him all of the time because it shines the spotlight on him.
In the context of the press conference, A, from Klopp's point of view, that's management, and B, from the point of view of the people who's asking the questions, it's journalism.
Biff it off, though.
It's journalism.
Biff it off.
No, but I don't want him to biff it off. If you go on behalf of talkSPORT, if we send one of our reporters at the Daily Mirror there and to ask a question, I don't want Klopp to biff it off. I want an answer.
But there is a certain point in time
when he's been treated by Southgate when he's on international duty.
He's not treated badly by Southgate. Southgate's recognised that he isn't playing very well, so he's not going to put him in the team. Why would you do that?
Say so. And that's what he did. He talked about why he's been such an asset for him in terms of Liverpool and the football club. He's 23 years of age. He's won all there is to win in terms of...
So he needs looking after.
He does, and that's what Klopp is doing. And you do that publicly as well as privately.
I don't think he is looking after him.
He is.
Fulham against Newcastle finished 4-1 to Newcastle. Newcastle brilliant in the game. Almiron's goal, first one, was absolutely terrific. Sending off for Chalobah, was it? It was very early in the game, I thought.
No, it was a bad tackle. Definite red card.
Darren?
Yeah, I agree with Crook. And Sam, as you know, it doesn't really matter when in the game you do it. I'm sure you will always tell me, talking to your referee friends.
I thought it was a bit of a yellowy orangey, that one. I was a bit sort of like, is it as bad as it looks? I'm not entirely sure. But, I thought it ruined the game as a spectacle, so I think maybe that's probably why. The biggest shock of the week is that West Ham and Wolves played in a match where there were more than one goal. 2-0 to West Ham United, and timely for good old David Moyes, because he needed that victory, but not so to... I mean, the goal, by the way, Skamaka's technique to rifle the ball in from the edge of the penalty area after it popped out from Bowen coming in from the right. Excellent, I thought. But obviously it's had a wide-ranging impact in the fact that Bruno Lage has been given his marching orders, Crook. What's happened there, and who are they going to get in?
Well, we did call it, didn't we, when we recorded the podcast at the end of last week, that the suggestion in some quarters was that David Moyes was the manager under pressure. I'd been told that really Bruno Lage was on his last legs at Wolves, and in fact I was told he had one game prior to the international break to save his job. That one game turned out to be West Ham, and it was a game too far. I think this is a change they've been contemplating for some time, even back to the end of last season when Wolves couldn't win a game. In fact, I remember covering a match at Stamford Bridge when they were 2-0 down against Chelsea. Came back, Conor Cody, ironically, scored a late equaliser to save a point and probably save Bruno Lage his job. And I do think the decision to dispense with Conor Cody is one that has come back to haunt Bruno Lage. I think he was a big character in the dressing room. I think that upset a lot of people. There have been problems behind the scenes for a while now. Players have not really bought into his training techniques. They found some of his sessions a bit dull. So I think it was inevitable. In terms of replacement, just look through George Mendes' list of clients, and I'm sure the name will be somewhere on that. They've been linked with Martins, former Olympiacos manager, who I know has been on their list before. And the other interesting one is Lopetegui at Sevilla, who's under a bit of pressure, former Spain coach. And I think he would be of interest as well. So I think there will be a Mendes connection with their next manager. Is that the right way to go, or should they possibly consider a different path? I guess the owners would say that link with Mendes to this point has served them pretty well.
Lopetegui, good at building a strong defence, which might be good for Wolverhampton Wanderers, because he was at Sevilla last year, best defence in La Liga. Pedro Martins did well and won a couple of championships in Greece, and then lost a Champions League qualifier to Maccabi Haifa and was fired by Evangelos Marinakis, the Olympiacos and Nottingham Forest owner. So, the two high quality or two good quality managers, I think, who could come into the Premier League. Southampton 1, Everton 2. The Everton revival goes on. 7 games unbeaten now for the Super Toffees. Darren, aren't they doing a great job? Frank Lampard's doing a brilliant job, isn't he?
He's doing a fine job, and he's underlining what I've been saying at the start of the season. I've never been in any doubt about the fact that they'll be okay this season because of the recruitment at the football club. They bought well in the summer. Tarkowski came on a free. Connor Cody came in, 2 leaders, 2 great defenders. Great, relatively speaking, they're fine defenders. Onana, West Ham fans missed out on him, and he's turned out, don't do that joke, Crook. He's turned out to be a good player for them in midfield, in the engine room. And Idrissa Gueye coming back to the football club as well. And bringing in Dwight McNeil up front. He's not prolific, but he does put in a shift. He gives them a focal point. And they're scoring goals, and the confidence is coming back to the side. And what's quite interesting is that they spent all that money on all those players and, tried to roll with the big dogs. But it's just getting back to basics and doing the simple things that has got them back winning again.
Solidity, characters, legs. That has massively helped that Everton team. I mean, obviously, Darren has admitted there that he never thought that there would be a problem for Everton. Crook has already changed his mind and said that he was wrong about Everton at the start of the season. Were you wrong about Southampton? They are going to be all right, you said.
I think they will, because I think they're playing well. I think even if you look at the game against Everton, they created a number of chances. Jordan Pickford, back in goal for Everton, had an excellent game. So I'd be more concerned if they weren't creating chances. And actually, my narrative has been fairly solid on this. I said they've signed a lot of young players. There will be bumps in the road. Young players will make mistakes. But ultimately, I have belief in the project. I think the board still have belief in Ralph Hasenhüttl, despite some
I'm pleased you have
suggestions
belief in the project. That's good.
to the contrary. So I think Ralph is safe for now. But listen, I'm not naive enough to think that if results don't improve, then they won't consider a change. But at the moment, I think because the owners who were there in force on Saturday can see that Southampton are playing well, maybe without getting the wins that they deserve, they're not overly concerned. Having said that, this is a really strong Premier League, and it's difficult to say with any great certainty who the 3 teams that are going down will be, because it's so competitive, not just at the top of the table, but at the bottom as well.
Yeah, and it's a very important period for Ralph Hasenhüttl, I think, because he's lost 4 of the last 5 games. He's going to lose the next one. They're playing Manchester City away from home. They've got West Ham at home after that, then Bournemouth away, which is going to be a huge game on a Wednesday night. Mm-hmm. And then Southampton play Arsenal and Crystal Palace before we get into November. If at that juncture the run that they're currently on continues, I can foresee a bit of an issue here coming down the track for Southampton.
I agree. I think that those games that you mentioned, particularly the West Ham and Bournemouth ones, are massive. And I guess the objective for any team going to the Etihad, especially one of the lower ranking sides, is just don't get Haaland.
Not get 9. Don't let them get 9, whatever you do. I suppose.
Don't let him get a double hat trick. Because Darren Ambrose has made a bold prediction that Erling Haaland this season will get a double hat trick.
Could Ralph Hasenhüttl survive another 9-0?
Now that might be a stretch too far.
In the words of Bruce Willis, how could the same blitz happen to the same guy twice? 3 times.
Okay, still got to talk about Bournemouth against Brentford. Gary O'Neill furious that he thinks he should have had 2 penalties in the game. You were at this game.
Yeah, it was a dreadful spectacle. Apart from the 2 penalty incidents, Ivan Toney really had an off day. Got yellow carded for booting the ball into the crowd out of frustration in the first half. So clearly his England snub has had an impact. I thought the first one was a penalty. Zamora going down under a challenge from Christopher Ayer. I thought it was a clumsy tackle. Didn't get enough of the ball for me. I was surprised when the young referee Thomas Bramall was summoned to the VAR monitor that he stuck to his on-field decision. I understand why he's got praise for that, but I also understand why Bournemouth feel hard done by. I know you think the second one, the handball, was more of a clear penalty. I didn't, because there was no deliberate act there. It bounced off his foot as he tried to make a clearance, hit his outstretched arm. I think the referee got that one right, although he couldn't wait to blow.
What's that got to do with anything?
He couldn't wait to blow the full-time whistle.
Why have you used the words deliberate act? I'm sorry, that was removed from the law in the summer. I don't understand.
Yeah, but I think listen, okay, whatever you think of the laws, it would have been harsh. It would have been harsh to give that penalty.
I think it would have been harsh, but do you know what? Going back to Darren's point about the need for consistency, right? One of the things that really irritates me about the PGMOL is that they have the guidance that they do, which is different to that of Europe, right? So, for example, if a ball hits the thigh of a defender and then hits up and pops up an outstretched arm, it's not going to be a penalty in the Premier League. But in the Europa League, Lisandro Martinez does that against Real Sociedad, and it's a penalty. Our clubs play in Europe. All of our clubs have an ambition to play in Europe, so let's referee the game the same way they do in Europe, because ultimately that's where you're going to end up trying to be. So don't add in an extra layer of interpretation around the handball law that isn't there. Ultimately, if your arm is outstretched and it's away from your body and the ball hits it, you are responsible for having your arm there. That is the law. Whether you agree with it or not is a different matter. But Matthias Jensen had his arm outstretched and the ball hit the floor, nicked off his leg and hit the underside. By the letter of the law, it is a penalty. But Thomas Bramwell decided the best thing to do was to blow the whistle and just hope for the best.
Get off the pitch.
It's the end of the game. Let's just go. Let's just go. Let's not do this again. I don't want to do it again. But anyway, another point for Gary O'Neill. Has he lost a game yet, Gary O'Neill?
No, 6 points from 4 games, 2 clean sheets after inheriting a team that lost 9-0. He's doing well.
Not bad at all, Gazza. Well done, fella. Darren, thank you very much for the sparring match today. That's been good fun.
You've forgotten Leeds nil, Aston Villa nil.
No, I haven't.
Have you done that?
No, I'm just not doing it. It was rubbish. It was absolutely terrible. If you watch it, it was awful. It was awful. Torturous. It was a waste of 2 hours. I'm not wasting any more minutes on it. It was
Fair enough.
Outrageously bad.
Are Aston Villa wasting their time with Steven Gerrard? That's a question maybe for next week's pod.
Darren?
I still think he needs time. Very, very early.
Okay. All right. Okay, that's it from us. Darren, thank you very much. Enjoyed that. Alex, see you on Thursday for the preview pod ahead of another weekend of great action on talkSPORT. We've got a Sunday night game next Sunday. In between time, loads of Champions League football and Europa League football on talkSPORT, including Manchester United's game on Thursday night with Crookie. He's doing that on talkSPORT 2. I'll be doing Chelsea AC Milan on Wednesday night as well as Live Football Tuesday night. We've got it all on talkSPORT, as you would expect.